Howdy and welcome to the F1 Hatchet. Let's have a short talk on Daniel Ricciardo replacing Nyck De Vries at AlphaTauri. Now, I had a short video out yesterday that I flubbed the audio on, so this is a replacement video for that. And so hopefully you can hear this video. Now, I will start off with my thoughts on Nyck De Vries actually joining the AlphaTauri team at the beginning of the season. Now, with Nyck De Vries being a Formula E champion and doing well in the other series that he's raced in, and actually even having a little bit of Formula One experience, I was thinking that he was going to be the leader of the AlphaTauri team. Yuki had actually struggled in his first two seasons with AlphaTauri, and I wasn't expecting anything great from Yuki this season. I figured he was going to grow, but not to the extent that he has shown this season so far. Now, Nyck, I was thinking who's going to jump into this team and might struggle for a race or two, just making sure that he has grips on that AlphaTauri, but be able to actually get together and pull forward in this team and become the leader of this team fairly quickly. Now, as we've seen, that really hasn't happened. He's lagged behind Yuki in the races. And as I have here a couple of graphs to show that, why would you replace Nyck De Vries with Daniel Ricciardo? I keep hearing, people say the driver is as only good as his last race. Now, if you look at that, you're looking back at the Daniel at McLaren, where he was not performing well at all. So why would you replace Nyck De Vries with Daniel Ricciardo? That's hopefully something I'm going to try to explore a little bit of, but we will start off with Nyck De Vries' performance this season. So, as you can see here, I have a graph showing Nyck De Vries' qualifying position versus his race finish position. Now, this graph goes from 0 to 20, so the lower on this graph you are, the better it is. And as you can see, Nyck has not really performed that much better in the races over his qualifying positions, and it's been near the back of the pack overall. So has he really improved? Has he really gained? Has he going forward? We see this graph actually going lower as we go through these races. We do not see that. It's pretty much a steady race, or steady graph as we go across. Now we look at Yuki's performance. And Yuki's had a couple of hiccups, and he's kind of fallen back in the last couple of races. But hopefully that's just the last couple of races and not overall. But we can see definitely that he has outperformed Nyck in both of these categories. And Yuki has actually kind of, for the most part, performed better in the race finish than he has in the qualifying session that he started off with. So we can go over here and look at the comparison between Nyck and Yuki directly on qualifying. And you can see that, Yuki has outperformed Nyck De Vries in the qualifying sessions for the most of this first 10 races, with a couple of hiccups from Yuki. Yes, they've fallen back in the back of the end of this little race series from Great Britain and whatnot, but overall they've performed fairly well. And the same thing comes for this race finishes here. So he starts off with Nyck was doing fairly well in those first couple of races against Yuki, even though he's a little bit behind Yuki, but he's kind of fallen off the grid in these in the back markers races. He really hasn't gotten grips with that AlphaTauri, and I think that the leadership there was looking for more of a leadership position for Nyck De Vries than Yuki was. So this is kind of one of the reasons why they're actually looking at replacing Nyck De Vries, is because he wasn't performing where he wanted, and we actually have a statement from Helmut Marko saying that they were never really considered Nyck De Vries a rookie. They were thinking that he was a well-performed driver. He has age for maturity and has raced in other series, so they were expecting him to be able to adapt fairly quickly to the Formula One series and that AlphaTauri car, which they have not seen. So that's one of the reasons why Nyck De Vries is getting booted. I was hoping that he would actually have the full season, as Yuki has had 2 full seasons so far to adapt to that car. So I was expecting at least 1 season for Nyck De Vries, but that has not happened. Now, when you're going to replace, Nyck De Vries with Daniel Ricciardo, and I was saying, like, you're good as your last race. Now, I went back and pulled data from Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris's first 10 races of last year in comparison. Now, maybe this should have been the end races, but I grabbed the first races to try to help compare that first of the season from last year. So we can see Daniel, at the very beginning of the season last year, keeping up with Lando, even though he's behind Lando in that nice performance graph, but then they kind of got sporadic as the races went on. Now, but if we look at the actual race finishes here, we can definitely see that Lando was outperforming Daniel fairly well in that McLaren last year, even at the beginning of the season. So why replace Nyck De Vries with Daniel Ricciardo? And as we see here, that Red Bull is in the mix, right? He went back and became a reserve driver for Red Bull. So he's on the docket for that. But why not go to one of their other junior drivers, the ones that were racing in Formula 2 or Formula 3, or some of these other races, series that they've, migrated to? Why did they go to Daniel? Now, Daniel, they claim, has had a good, practice session in that Red Bull, has had good tire testing, had good simulator work, but does that really prove that he can drive that AlphaTauri any better than Nyck De Vries? Some think that this is actually a push forward and that they're going to put pressure on Sergio Perez in that, sister team of the Red Bull main team, as he has kind of faltered on the qualifying sessions as of late. And so they're having to really work at getting him up through the field during the races to gain the points and not be directly alongside Max on the podium for the most of the races, where he's had to fight back through the field and not a clear second teammate there. So is that a concern? Is that a something that they think that Daniel Ricciardo, when he promoted into at the end of the season or maybe the next season? Now, according to Christian Horner, that is not the case. But we've heard that in the past as well, that they're not really considering things and then things happen that way in general. What are your thoughts on that? But, in the sense that, Daniel Ricciardo, they think that he has had that performance that he's had in the past, and the McLaren was just a one-off issue of adapting to that car. What are your thoughts on Daniel Ricciardo actually adapting to the AlphaTauri? As, he jumps back into that lower performing vehicle, can he actually outperform Yuki? Can he lead Yuki in developing that AlphaTauri to be more pressure on that back end teams as they fall into the back of the pack in the constructor standings? Can they claw themselves back into contention for some better points in that construction, run? I know they're not going to get ahead of, the Ferraris or even possibly the McLarens, but, could they overtake Alfa Romeo or Haas or even the Williams? The Williams have, kind of looked like they've come alive these last few races. Where are they going to be in regards to those teams? And I think that's the concern that they're having currently. Can Daniel actually, push that team forward in this regard? And on that note, leave your comments and your concerns if you have missed anything. If you've pulled any more data out that I have not seen, I would love to see it. But until then, I will see you next time. Thank you very much, and goodbye.